Welcome, Lisa, calling in from the beautiful Sedona, Arizona. Great to have you on the show.
Thanks. I'm so happy to be here.
Awesome. What's it like in Sedona? Like everyone knows it's kind of very artsy, very spiritual. Like what's the vibe like in Sedona for you?
It's all of that and more. If you like mountain biking and hiking, we also have a lot of that to offer. I didn't know how hard mountain biking could be until I moved to Sedona and tried it and got a really cool bike and promptly fell and didn't break anything. But Sedona is awesome because it has something for everyone. The thing that is really funny when we first moved here, I was like, where else can you go and be in the vegetable aisle at Safeway having conversations or hearing conversations about extraterrestrial landings? And
Yes.
like, this is
Love
super cool. Like, I have no idea what they're talking about. I have not personally seen an alien, but it is fun to eavesdrop on these conversations.
That's great. Other than like Roswell, right? That was probably the only other place where they would be talking about that.
Yeah. Well, they have tours here, right? They take people out like every day to see the aliens. And I'm just like, yeah. You're like, what? When you meet the drivers, you're like, where do I start this conversation? Like, do you believe or like what? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's fun.
I got to get some groceries, but I want to see a spaceship. Can we just hit those? I love it.
Awesome. Well, so good to have you. And we pronounce your name right. It's Lisa.
Yeah, Lisa.
Awesome. We're such a cool spelling. I never saw it spelled that way. So that must be you're a very unique person and your parents recognized it the day you were born.
That's right. Yeah. My parents were about to become hippies and maybe the name was the beginning of that journey, but born in the mid 60s and hippies were like, I think officially hippies by about 1971. So.
Okay. I thought maybe they started and then aborted the process.
No.
Oh, good. And is it any wonder you ended up in Sedona then, right?
Right.
I know. Isn't that amazing? Who knew? But
that's so cool.
Yeah.
Well, Lisa, we would love to hear what are you excited about right now? Personal life, business life? What's got you all fired up right now?
I'd say what has me fired up right now is financial freedom, like reaching this place where I don't have to work for money for the rest of my life. I have reached a place of having enough. And I'm still figuring out because we don't live in a culture that embraces that idea that I have enough. I'm still learning what that means and how to be in the energy of I have enough and I can live my life in the way that will bring myself and my family the most joy just by being in that resonance of enoughness.
Love that. What a great place to start.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little about your journey getting there? I mean, your background is in, I understand, financial advisor. You were in business development banking. You were neck deep in the world of money and got to learn all the narratives perhaps. And in it, tell us a little bit about that journey bringing you to here on this journey of having enough.
Most recently, it came from realizing that it was even possible to live that way. But I think my roots were coming from a home where my parents were hippies. They had not barely finished high school. They financially struggled. They were not taught about money from their parents, not in the way that was responsible. And so I grew up in a home where scarcity was the name of the game. We never knew if we had enough money to pay the house payment or the car payment. And my parents started a business and ended up losing all of their money in the course of getting this business started when I was in, middle school, early high school. And so my journey was coming from not having enough and then deciding at a really young age, like around 8, when I found out about money and like the fact that you could have dimes add up to like end up being like worth $5 or $10. I was like completely consumed by the idea of compound interest by the age of 9. I decided that if I had money, then I would be happy because my parents weren't happy and they struggled with money. So I just made that very simplistic assumption
Sure.
and then proceeded to live my life for many years as if money was everything. Like, how are you going to make it? And I started a business at 8 and I worked really hard and lied about my age when I was just barely 14. Funny story, kind of. I lied on a job application, got the counselor at school to kind of ignore what I had done, but I wanted a job at McDonald's of all places. Like, I'm not sure why anyone would aspire to this, but I did. And it was the best first job, but I had to lie about why, because at that time in California, you needed to be 16 and they wouldn't hire you, but I was 2 years younger than everyone else. And I had to explain why. I always had a story of like, why was I only a freshman in high school? And why didn't I have a car? And I just, a web of lies.
Wow.
A throne of lies.
Yes,
just to get into flip some burgers.
Yeah.
Now that's motivation.
Yeah, it started young, but I was like, I'm going to do this. And by the time I was 16 and ready to quit McDonald's, I was like a manager. Like, it was hilarious because I worked so hard and I loved making money. And so that didn't stop for many, many years. And I'll say that it may not have ever stopped. It may not have ever came to the point where I questioned whether or not this was really what I was supposed to be doing with my whole life, just being consumed by making money. But in 1999, my dad was brutally murdered by his ex-girlfriend and her boyfriend.
Oh, my.
And it was like a house of cards just ready to crumble. And I realized in the course of going through the grief and all the stuff that you could imagine a person goes through, realizing that someone not just died, but died in this, there was a manipulation and all kinds of deceit and all kinds of bad stuff that my dad was a part of. Like, it's not like he was an innocent bystander. Like, there was stuff that had happened and we were estranged at the time. We had been estranged for almost 10 years by the time this happened, which even made it harder for me. But when the dust settled, I realized that I didn't know, other than making money, I didn't know how to be happy. I didn't know how to live the life that I was really here to live. I did not at that point believe in God. Like, I was really lost. And it began a journey that continues to today that has changed my life, not just with the money, because it's not just about the money. Like, I'm fortunate. We became self-made. My husband and I became self-made millionaires by our mid-30s, just a few years after this happened. But I also started questioning the assumptions of money and the assumptions of the value I had given to money, and that my self-value was connected to the money. And all of that started to rupture after my dad was killed.
Wow.
Wow. What a story. Would you mind sharing a little bit, Leisa, about what did that contrast of, here you are, you're living a dream that most would envy and most aspire to, and then your world gets drastically disrupted and you're processing and you're coming out the other end. What were some of the big things you had to let go? Because I read in your bio that it's about releasing a lot of things, releasing narratives, releasing limiting, I don't want to say limiting beliefs. It's kind of a pretty common term, but what was it for you? What were some of the things for you that got so disrupted and dislodged that you realized this just isn't true? This doesn't work for me, if you don't mind sharing.
Yeah. When I went through what happened in 1999, I found myself drawn to meditation and mindfulness practices and Buddhism for several years. And one of the first teachings I got from Buddhism that really sunk in was so simple. It seems so simple, but maybe not for people like me at that time, which was, you are not in control of what happens to you in life. And the reason that was such a big deal is, when you come from a lot of trauma and you come from the world that I grew up in, I mean, my dad was dealing drugs and I never knew if the FBI was going to bust our doors in and take him away. And his best friend went to prison for several years when I was growing up. And so I knew the risks. It was just constant state of fear of like, when are my parents going to get caught? When am I going to be taken away? Just all these narratives that were going on in the back of my head. And so what does a kid do when you're raised in that environment, you try to control the world. You're like, if I can control everything, I will be safe.
Yep.
So the first big lesson was, oh my gosh, what if you're not in control? And when that question started to come in, and I started to realize that maybe it wasn't as simplistic as I had made life to be. And maybe there was a whole bunch of stuff that I needed to learn to be able to handle and become more resilient and be able to greet life and to love what is, rather than constantly trying to change the world around me to suit, what I thought it was supposed to look like.
Yeah, that illusion of control. I think that's a common reaction to trauma, isn't it? It's like, well, I can't control this and this, but what can I control? Because ultimately, like, what we're looking for is stability, right? We're looking for some sort of solid ground to put our foot on. Otherwise, it feels like we're kind of just bobbing up and down in the ocean, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it began to unravel all the narratives that I was holding on to that were causing me a lot of suffering and a lot of struggle. And I realized that even though I had broken free from a lot of the patterns my parents had had with money, I was still living inside of struggle. And I think that, I wrote The Mindful Millionaire to chronicle this journey, my book, about what happens when we realize that maybe we've made money way too important in our lives than we should have, because that's kind of the theme. One, the book is written for two people. One, like my parents, who could never figure money out and struggle and can't figure out why it's not staying longer. And there's some stability. And also for myself, here I am, a self-made millionaire, and I'm still unhappy. And I don't know where happiness comes from, because now I've got everything I want, and yet it's not bringing me the happiness I'm seeking. But as the work has progressed, I'm starting to work on my next book, and it's most likely to be called Unshakable Flow, because what I think we're all moving towards in life is an understanding of what kind of resiliency do we need as human beings, where we can deal with things that come at us, question our perceptions, question our beliefs about maybe we're addicted to struggle, which is what I think I had learned early in life. And I think most of the people are like kind of addicted to the struggle. And so when we start to question assumptions, what does life look like when we're constantly questioning like the struggle? Like, you're working on something, right? And you're like, this is so hard. It's such a slog. I just wish it would go away. And then you wake up to that and you're like, what if I look at this completely different? Like, what if I look at this as fun? What if I look at this as an opportunity? What if I look at this as something that's actually bringing me joy? What would happen to my life as a result of that?
I love that. It reminds me of I'm driving down the road with my 90-year-old mother a couple of years ago, and my sister in the car. Mom's in the backseat. I don't know what topic we were on. And my mother is Italian and worked with her hands and has built houses and put additions on. She is the poster child for do it yourself, figure it out, fix everything, don't buy anything new. Which is so valuable in so many ways. But we're driving the road, and I forget the time we're on, but she suddenly blurts out, well, if it's not hard, it's not worth it. And I about wrecked the car, pulled over, because that narrative, it got so embedded in my brain and in my psyche that if things didn't feel like work or hard or challenging, then I didn't trust it. And I hear that a little bit of what you're saying about making money, and this idea of the grind. Bob and I talk about this with others as well. So, the narrative around entrepreneurship is the grind, the struggle, the pride in the 12 and 16-hour days. And, look how much I'm grinding and suffering to make my dreams come true. And I think there's a new narrative out there, and it sounds like you're tapping into that.
Yeah, I hope so. Because it's not really very fun to live life, that way. And I think this idea, I'm working on a project with some friends, and it's about finding folks who are curious about this idea of play and like having life be filled with play, and even our work, and like setting a higher standard for what is something I'm willing to invest myself in. Going back to what I said, if I have financial freedom, I'm fortunate, but we don't have to have it to be able to say to ourselves, I refuse to work from a place of neediness, or like, I need the money. I need to work hard. Instead, it's like, I want to enjoy my life. I don't know if today is my last day. I am going to live it fully, doing the things that I really, really enjoy. And I'm going to find a way, if it's possible, to even make money doing that. Like, I think that's what a lot of us are asking ourselves.
I'd like to take you back, Leisa. You mentioned at the beginning kind of this concept of enough. And our culture doesn't really allow us to define enough. Can you help us and unpack that a little bit from your experience? What have you discovered working with clients? Like, how does one define enough? How does one feel enough? Can you help us kind of walk through that?
Yeah. I think the first thing that comes to mind, and then maybe we can kind of converse about it, is that just like I said, I did this. We use money as a barometer, or like a measuring stick for value. We've been taught, like, our value as a human being, especially in the West, is connected to how much money we have or how much money we're making. And so one of the reasons why I think nobody talks about having enough is nobody feels like they're enough. So you don't even open that conversation because you're so busy trying to prove to yourself and to the world that you are enough, that you lose your way in actually understanding that the only place that your sense of enoughness it's only going to come from inside of you. It's not going to come from anything outside of you. You have to decide that about yourself.
I love that.
So
I love it.
So, ask me a question maybe, or what comes up for you as I say that.
Yeah. So, and again, we're kind of just playing off what either we're personally feeling or what the audience might feel. I think, and I agree, like, we're a competitive society where, like, let's go to sports, right? As soon as somebody wins a championship in a major sport, the first question on the reporter is like, how does it feel? And then, like, what are you going to do for next year? Right. It's always like, are you going to repeat? Right. It's never a point where you kind of go, oh, let's breathe. And often they have to be like, well, I want to enjoy this for a minute, but it's always about the next thing. It's just ingrained to us as a society. Our athletics, our education system is always about, like, the message is you're never enough. Like that's what is essentially told to us. And, and I think our parents and we as parents unconsciously probably just continue that narrative because it's what was ingrained in us. So how does one break out of that, where it's like, you go, no, that's not the narrative I'm choosing to live anymore. Like, I'm going to determine that, and I'm not going to let outside forces allow them to put measurements on me.
I do wonder if this is left over from, like, the Industrial Revolution and, like, the things that had to happen to people to sacrifice their lives in pursuit of building and working hard and creating. And it's just gotten, like, melded into the culture that we live in because it's the sea we're swimming in. I think this is why it's hard to unpack is it's based on this competition and this idea that you have to do more, you have to do more. And then even for me as a parent, I've got two children, a son who's going to finish high school in May, and then a daughter who's 25. And I think even when we think, okay, well, if I come off of the expectations and I come off of all of that and I'm like, you're good, you're enough, there's a fear that our children won't have any drive perhaps, or won't want to go, like, do the job that they need to do and take care of themselves. And so I can see it everywhere in the sea that I'm swimming in. It's not like I'm not in it. I'm just questioning a lot of it.
And we're participating in it, right?
100%.
I mean, like, right after this interview, Leisa, I coach high school basketball. Like, I couldn't go into the locker room and say like, hey, we're good enough. Like, that's just not done, right? Like, they would be like, what kind of coach are you? Like, we're always trying to push them to be more than they are, right? We're always trying to get them to push to their limit. We want them to give 100% effort. So for me, it's always a struggle, right? It's like, how do you balance that, right? Because I'm both trying to live where like I'm satisfied with who I am and that I have enough, right? I have everything I need, but yet my business, my vocations, everything is like, no, you have to do more. It's a struggle. It's a big struggle for me.
Yeah. There's a quote by Frederick Buckner that says this place of joy, of abundance, is where your greatest joy meets the world's greatest need.
Mm.
And I return to this again and again, because I think that you think about the movies, the sport movies, I don't know, Return of the Titans. You think of like these sports, we'll stay there as best as I can, because it's not like I know a lot, but
Brandon doesn't either. So
okay.
I watched the movie.
So he watches the movie.
That's the football. Is that like the oblong ball? That's
Yeah.
the one.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's like a spaceship. Okay, gotcha.
I'm gonna guess that the movies around sports that bring out the best in us are not about the competition as much as the love of the sport, of the activity.
Mm-hmm.
And that if you don't tap into that passion and that joy of the activity, then you are all about the competition and the winning, which isn't what brings the greatest joy ultimately.
Mm-hmm. So it would be let's compare it then to a hike through Rocky Mountain National Park, or even Sedona. You obviously are going towards a destination, but if your goal is to just basically get to the end and say I did it, you've missed everything along the way. Is that kind of what you're reflecting there?
Yeah, I get chills, 100%. And
Good.
And this is the funny thing, right? You teach what you most need to learn.
Yes.
I was like a destination person.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even look on the way. And that has been the shift in my life, like living in the moment, looking around. And I mean, people around me sometimes are probably like, she's kind of weird, because I am totally in awe about things that other people are like, yeah, what's the big deal? I'm like, did you see that? This is the most amazing thing because it is. When you opened your eyes and your heart to this blissful experience of life, and you're not so distracted at just getting to the final destination.
Oh, I love it. If I could share, I think this has been something for me has wrestled over the years with goal setting, because, the narrative is all about goal setting. And I've done that for a long time. And like, it's the end of the year, like, didn't hit that one. And I think what I've learned in talking with different people in this space is that one of the drawbacks about the idea of the goal is that it's a future thing. And I cannot control all variables. And it causes me to live a year from now, 10 years from now. And I'm not trying to poo-poo goals at all. I think there's absolutely some kind of a balance to be struck. But what I realized is when I was doing it, it was what I was looking at, my happiness was outsourced to another time. And so this idea of, which is probably, it's so cliche, but it's so very true, is what you're hearing is enjoying the journey and not the destination. It's absolutely critical. Finding because this is the only moment we have is right this right now. So I love that you're bringing that up. And can you talk about how what I heard earlier, what you're saying about your experience is the drive, the goal setting, to become a self-made millionaire, and then getting to a point of realizing, well, am I enough? What is enough? And it sounds like you found you're finding that middle ground between these two polarities. And maybe it's in your book, maybe it's in your notebook. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think that the big shift that had to occur for me to be on the other side is the inner narrative. that guides us. And because I work with a lot of folks, like I'm a coach, I'm a business coach, I'm also, I guess, spiritual coach in helping people understand what is that split in personality that many times we have, where we're here now doing something, but then there's this other voice with this whole narrative of like what's happening. Like it's like the sportscaster, like, and then, and until those become one, you're going to be struggling with inner demons, first and foremost, that are guiding you in not so helpful ways. You will not feel enough. If there's a narrator that's like criticizing or judging yourself or others constantly happening, you're living two separate lives. And it's hard to reconcile those. And and you don't feel enough, right? Because that voice is constantly there. And it can show, for some of us, it shows up as we're really critical of others. And what I found is once you deal with the realization that you can't be judging others or criticizing others in any way, shape, or form without it actually translating to what you're doing to yourself, like they go together 100%. You're shaking your head, Brandon.
Oh, yes.
So some of us have one and we think we don't have the other, but they actually are both present, period. Yeah. And you gotta stop it. You've got to be mindful enough to notice that voice is not the voice of God. That voice is literally, in most cases, a very destructive voice in your consciousness that has to be squashed. And the only way most of us can do that is by, looking at our shadows, uncovering the pieces of ourselves that we despise, and bringing them back home into this wholeness of who we are.
Powerful.
That's very powerful.
One of my favorite quotes is that relationships are mirrors, and that, walking around, and Bob and I have talked about this, being in different social environments that we go in, is like, well, that person kind of rubs me the wrong way. And like, okay, well, how come, Brandon? What do you see in that person that is in you that it rubs yourself the wrong way, that annoys the hell out of you? Because that's what they're showing you. It's awful. It sucks, but it's true. It's like, God, why am I so annoyed by that guy? Oh, because it's me. I do the same damn thing.
Yeah, it's why the holidays are so hard for people. Because we're being confronted with these aspects of ourselves that we don't want to see. And yet Uncle Bob shows up and you're like, I don't want to spend any time with this person. But if you really got down into what was going on, you'd realize that there's something that you're not wanting to look at about yourself.
Oh my.
Uncle Bob is reflecting it.
We stepped into it now.
Yep. Especially with the word Bob. That's great.
Yeah. Oh, you triggered. Uncle Bob's a cool uncle though.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
is he the fun uncle?
No,
I'm known as the fun uncle in my family. I'm known as the funkle.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah. I'm the wise uncle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're the wunkle. I'm the funkle. Yeah.
So Leisa, one of the things that jumped out in the research that our producers did is the experience with your father, just one of the worst things a human could experience, but it's not the only thing you've lived through. Can you talk about that incident and with the doctor and share a little bit about how that transformed you?
Yeah. So in 2013, I was sitting in my doctor's office right before Christmas, December 17th. Never forget that day. And a man walked into a pretty large clinic, looked at me and a few other people that were kind of just looking at the door for some reason, pulled out a very large gun and said, "You might want to leave now," and proceeded to go on a shooting rampage and ultimately killed the doctor that I was waiting to see, who I had been working with for several months and developed a really close relationship with. Was there with a vendetta against a different doctor, but my doctor got involved. He shot a patient, ultimately shot the doctor he was trying to kill, and then killed himself. And I was there. I thankfully did not see him shoot people, but trying to get out of a third-story building where people are screaming and shots are being fired in all directions was a huge turning point in my life. I didn't understand. But in that moment, I realized like this feeling of absolute terror of like, we're being hunted was the feeling that came. And I mean, back then in 2013, which wasn't that long ago, this was still more rare than it's become today, sadly, right?
Very, very sadly, but yeah, very true.
Yeah. So it changed me forever, but not in a way that maybe a lot of people would have been affected. What happened for me is I ended up staying with this group of nurses. I got out of the building. It was very cold in Reno, Nevada. These nurses had run out without their car keys, without their jackets, without their purses. And so I got as many people in my car as possible. We drove across the street and we kind of watched the whole world unfold as the SWAT car showed up and everything. And we were talking to people on phones that were still in the building, not knowing what was going to happen. And I ended up going to the police station later that day. I had a really bad feeling that my doctor was hurt. He was that kind of person. I felt like he would get involved. I just had this sense and I wanted to know. But when I was at the doctor's office, this is me 14 years into a daily meditation practice, which I know has changed me. Like I can't even begin to tell you how much it's changed me. But me being in that experience of, 4 hours at the police station, watching it all unfold, taught me something about myself, even though I was still in that fight and flight and all the hormones and all the things that cortisol and all the stuff that happens. There was a energy of like, I know something that could help everyone here. Like the mindfulness of what I have gone through with my dad and trying to help myself and healing and teaching meditation and teaching mindfulness. I was like, I have tools that are not supposed to just be left with me anymore. Like I'm actually supposed to start sharing this with the world. And it was a really big calling. Like it wasn't a coincidence that I was there that day. Like I was there with a purpose. And at the time I was a financial advisor. And in that moment and in the next 24 hours, I was like, I'm walking away from my job, my career. I built up a very successful practice. And I was like, I'm not supposed to do this anymore. I'm actually supposed to get out there and start teaching about money and mindfulness. And that's exactly what I did. It took me about 3 months to kind of wrap up my affairs and close down and walk away from, by the way, people don't walk away from those sorts of jobs very often because you have a guaranteed stream of income for the rest of your life. I mean, it was unheard of. And my peers could not believe it because I was so successful. And I was like, I'm done. I'm supposed to go do something else. And I started this business as a result.
Had you been having those thoughts prior to that event?
I was. And I talk about this in the book. Like I started having like premonitions and things happening. And I've had them all my life, being at what would seem to be the wrong place at the wrong time. But then in retrospect, it's like, well, why was I lived in San Francisco in the Bay Area. I had a meeting. Let me step back. When I was 7 years old, I had a premonition that thanks to watching some like sci-fi thing on TV about Nostradamus. And I was like, I knew that the World Trade Center thing was going to happen based on some things that they had researched and talked about. This is in 1978 or something.
Wow.
I had a meeting in the World Trade Center at 9:15 on 9/11, even though I lived in the Bay Area. And that meeting got canceled at the last minute. And I was still there in New York City. My husband thought I was in the building. But like, if I went through my life, it's been a series of these crazy situations where I was there or close enough that was like wake up call. Like you're supposed to do something in your life that's bigger than what you think. And so when that happened, when that shooting happened, I was like, okay, God, or whatever's going on, I've got the message. I am not supposed to just do my little normal life and just, help people with their money. There's something bigger here. And I got the memo.
Now I got the chills. That is amazing. Now it's not and surprisingly, it's not the first time I heard a story from somebody who was supposed to be there on that day. Like there's a lot of people who like, there was things at play or things in motion that's like, no, that's not going to happen. Or like supposed to be on one of the flights. I've had conversations with that. That's amazing. So yeah, having that going, okay, sometimes the triggering event, right, is like, okay, finally, this is like, I don't need any more signs. I need to move.
Yeah.
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 Because you really, do you want another sign after that? It's like, wait,
No.
like I'm going to stop.
No.
Like, thank you. Got the memo. Just let me get my affairs in order. But yeah, I'm moving on. Thank you.
Yeah. And I'll say one other thing about that. And maybe this is calling to people too who are listening or watching, and they're like, I'm getting those signs and I'm not listening to it. But I just want to lean into this a little bit more. Like, I don't have a huge following, but maybe, 30, 50,000 people on the planet know about my work as a result. We've sold over 10,000 copies of The Mindful Millionaire. But here's where it gets weird. I met Ariana Huffington in a line at a conference in the bathroom right after I started my company, and we talked, and she's like, you should write for the Huffington Post. I was like, yeah, I'm like a terrible writer, but I will start writing for the Huffington Post. So I start doing it because she invited me. I was like, you don't turn that down. So then within a few months, the agent who ultimately represented me for The Mindful Millionaire came to me and said, what you're writing about is so different. I would love to help you. I don't reach out to anybody. Like, she's one of the most successful agents on the planet, reaches out to me. Is like, I'm going to help you write this book. I think that you've got a book in you. And sure enough, several years later, I've written the book. We take it out to shop, with big publishers. St. Martin's Press ends up deciding to publish it. I mean, it's crazy stuff, because this would be things like, I wasn't a great writer, but I had so much help and so many supportive things along the way that helped me. And I wrote that book. I had to write 1 million words to get down to the 90,000. Like, I poured my heart and soul into that book.
Yeah.
But the people who read this book from all over the world, in Afghanistan, people write to me. And I talk about chakras and Islam, they don't necessarily go together. Like,
no, they do not.
No.
Yeah, but people are like, it's okay. I get it. It's all one. Like, the book has touched so many lives and opened people up to possibility. And I didn't think I had it in me. Definitely did not ever think that this would have been possible. It's just, I leaned in and said, I'm willing to try.
Well, the universe certainly tapped you on the shoulder and said, Leisa, you're a messenger. So it certainly helped you move to that place. That's wonderful.
It's interesting, because what you're describing in this enoughness, you're talking about the financial, and what does financial enoughness mean? And then you're also talking about what does it personally, spiritually mean to be enough? And just from a perspective, looking and listening to the story, is you had to be convinced you were enough to write a beautiful and powerful book to help others, right? So you have your spiritual practice of meditation, and you've had these dramatic things happen, and you were in the habit of healing yourself, and then but you probably would have never written the book unless there had to be signs, right? There had to be some kind of catalyst to say, okay, let's do this. And
other than Ariana Huffington tapping you on the shoulder.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Like,
there you go.
Come on.
Yeah. It's like we're trying to convince ourselves all the time we're enough, and then it's beautiful how the universe reaches out and say, well, let me just show you. Let me just boost your confidence a little. Let me get you. Let me help you with that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's such a beautiful reflection. Thank you for that. Yeah. Like, I do really believe that I didn't, just like most people, I didn't think that I was enough. I didn't think that anyone would buy a book or, negotiate a very, very successful, crazy successful book deal. I mean, those things aren't things that I think we can dream about them, but then we're like, oh, how do they happen? And I think what I had to do, right, going back to that initial teaching, I had to let go of the control. I had to let go of thinking that I was in control of this life and say, well, what is possible? Let's work together, right? Co-create with the universe. Will be very woo-woo in Sedona. Like, I do feel like that's what's happening now. And to me, that's abundant. That's abundant living.
Yeah. Well, since you mentioned it, we need to go there. You talk about money and chakras. Let's go there. Brandon and I love this stuff. Tell us a little bit about.
I do.
And we want to say something for people to get the book. We want them to get the Millionaire Mindset, but talk a little bit about what our appetite on what you help people with in regards to this particular aspect.
So what I uncovered in all these years, so over 30 years of working with people and their money, is that there are these patterns that we repeat over and over again around scarcity. And when I looked at all the experience I had had of being people's financial advisor, mortgage banker, or insurance adjuster, like I've done so many different financial jobs, I saw the practical aspects. But when I became a coach and started helping people with their mindset, I saw these same things showing up deeper inside of like, why do we do these things from a practical standpoint? Why do we create these messes? Why do we spend so much that we get in debt and we can't get out of debt? Why are we addicted to debt, for example? Why are we great at making money, but we can't keep it? Why are we great at making money, but we can't invest it? Like it was amazing how there were all these patterns. And one day after I moved to Sedona, interesting enough, in 2016, chakras are everywhere. And I had known about them and I had done meditations with them, but something clicked with me where I took all these patterns I had seen as a financial advisor and smashed them up against my understanding of the chakras, which, by the way, were motivated. Maslow's hierarchy of needs is very closely aligned with the chakras. So if you like Maslow better, just stick with Maslow, because that's what I used to teach on. He was inspired by the chakras. It had something to do with what he ultimately created in that hierarchy of needs. So I put these hierarchy of needs next to what was happening with people financially, smashed them together, used all my clients to kind of test these ideas. And the next thing you know, I was like, this is a framework that could change people's lives in the way that they understand their relationship with money. And that became the book. And that became the things that I've been teaching about ever since.
Wow. I love it. In my head, I just got a diagram of chakras, Maslow's, and you and your system, however, I'm visual. So it's so interesting. So fascinating.
So what was like, once you've made this, okay, you've discovered nuclear fusion. Okay. Right. Tell us the story of how you took this and actually then maybe they were clients. You didn't call them guinea pigs, right? They were clients, but you did do some testing.
Sometimes I did. I think that they were like, okay, whatever.
So how did you take this learning and apply it to your clients, and what did they experience as a result of that?
Practical experience of somebody who had learned the model and then they translate it, because it's really simple to understand. This is around the heart chakra. The heart chakra has to do with like giving and receiving. And many of us have been taught it's better to give than to receive, but that creates like a martyr. That creates a very worn out person.
That creates an Uncle Bob.
Yes.
So one gal came across the framework and she was like, oh my gosh, this is so interesting. Because the minute she heard about this like balance with giving and receiving, she got flashbacks to her childhood. And in her case, she had grown up in a very affluent home. All of her needs were met. Her parents, she was a single only child. She got a brand new car on her 16th birthday. Whenever she wanted something, it would appear. And what she realized in learning about the framework around the heart chakra and money, which is all about having a balance between giving and receiving back, that there's some balance there, that we understand the importance of both parts, right? She realized that now that she had started a business, she was having a ton of trouble asking for people to pay for anything. She just kept giving stuff away for free constantly. And when she saw the model, she started to see how, when she was growing up, not because of anybody's fault, but because money was so prevalent, whenever she needed something, it got bought and given to her.
Okay.
She had equated asking for anything or receiving anything as love.
Oh, wow.
So every time she went out to ask for people to pay her, she felt like she was asking them to love her.
Wow.
And she was like, well, that's so silly. Like, that's not true. Like, that's not what I'm asking them to do. I'm just asking them to pay me money for the services rendered. You see,
Yeah.
it's so simple sometimes, like just understanding that there were some things that happened to us, sometimes traumatic, sometimes not. In her case, it wasn't. But when we go to the real world and we start living, we don't understand that there's these unconscious biases that are coming and hurting us in our business, hurting us when it comes to holding on to money. Another one of my clients I talk about in the book, she'd grown up in a home where there was severe deprivation to the point where her mom wouldn't even buy fresh milk. She only got powdered milk, canned food. Money could not be spent on any kind of indulgences. And so she had grown up and her mom was always saving money, right? So deprivation to save. So when she got into my work and she started questioning the assumptions, she realized that this saver in her mom had caused her to hate the saver in herself. She couldn't save money. She was making hundreds of thousands of dollars, but she didn't want to be like her mom and save that money because it meant deprivation. So she was out there buying everything. Money would go through her hands. I kid you not, this woman was like, did not have much to go on, even though she was making lots of money. Now she's a multimillionaire just by learning this one thing that we were ready to break, right? She was ready to let it go. And I was ready to help her realize that that pattern and that relationship with her mom, just because her mom behaved that way, did not mean it was bad to save. In fact, there was all these great things. And there's breakthroughs and there's tears and there's all kinds of stuff that we got to let go of. But on the other side, it worked. Like, it works to like a crazy degree, because once we question the assumptions and we look back and we're like, well, that was stupid, we don't do it anymore.
Oh, wow.
Does that help?
Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic.
I feel like you did a little therapy on me right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Leisa, as you go out, you're now doing coaching, mentoring. I mean, people are probably reading the book and hiring you, but like, what are people actually? Do they realize before they kind of work with you that they've got some sort of issue around money? And then like, have they got to the point where it's like, I need to fix this? Is that kind of where you step in?
Yeah, you've got to be at a place where you're like, I've tried everything else. Because if you've heard the idea of like ego death or ego disillusion, like,
yes,
the work that I do, I am not a therapist. I've never gone to a therapist in my life. I've used spiritual teachings to help me live the life that I live. And so it doesn't come from like, let's talk about it some more. Like, we're going in and we're doing deep soul excavation in a very short amount of time. Most people don't want anything to do with that. But the people who are like, this is a big deal, like I'm going to lose my relationship with my partner, my spouse or my business partner. Like, it's when people have gone through all the possibilities and realize that they do not have the tools, and maybe even therapists. A lot of my clients have seen therapists for many years. They've helped them with a ton of stuff. But unless you have worked with money for a really long time, like I have, and done my own work, it's hard to find this stuff. So I can see things in a very short amount of time that most people would take years to identify. And it has a lot to do with working with people and their money for so long. I think that that's the benefit of the work that I do, is it's not just the inner work, it's also the outer representation. I'm looking at like, what's going on in your relationship with money? Where are you getting snagged? And then I'm helping people trace it back to the root of why that pattern is happening. And then I'm helping them let it go, and then create a new way of seeing themselves and that relationship with money. And it's very powerful, because only people who are ready want to come and work with me.
Sure.
Yeah. And that's, that's the role of a coach, role of a specialist. It's, people need to be ready. They need to be ready to change before the change will happen. That's perfectly acceptable. It's just a great way to do business. It's more satisfying for you to work with people that actually want to help themselves, but it's most satisfying for them because they've made that decision. So Leisa, like if people aren't interested in the book already, I don't know what's wrong with them. They must not be ready. But I'm assuming Millionaire Mindset's the name of the book, correct?
Or it's my now you've got me confused. What
I'm
is it
sorry.
called? The Mindful Millionaire.
I am very sorry. The Mindful Millionaire.
Yeah.
Very sorry about that. So the Mindful Millionaire, available everywhere. I'm sure books are sold, including Amazon and all those good places. But also, I'm assuming you have resources, website. Love for you to share a little bit how you can help people beyond the book.
Yeah, a great place to get started is to come to wealthclinic.com/vision. And if you enter your information, you'll get the first chapter of the book. You'll get really cool meditation that I am guiding you through to kind of look at what's going on inside that relationship with money, and a few other goodies. So a nice way to see if this is something that you want to try. And
what a great domain name, Wealth Clinic.
Love that.
Oh my goodness. So descriptive. It's hard to find really good domain names these days, but when like you come up with something, Brandon and I had this phenomenon, like we'll think of something and we'll go, how is this domain still available?
Right.
But
Yeah.
Like this, what a great domain. Leisa, this has been eye-opening. It's been inspiring.
Yes.
It's been convicting. Like I'm literally going to go to Amazon after this interview and get this book. And I can't see why.
It's in my Amazon right now. There
it's already in his cart. He's checking out before the interview's over.
He's being checked out.
No, it's just
I
been
did
wonderful.
the audio book too. It's
did you?
Voice. I did.
Yeah.
So if
Well,
you're
let me
okay
ask
with
this,
my
'cause
voice.
Is there lots of assignments in the actual book, or is it kind of, because I notice I'll get an audiobook, then I'll actually buy the physical book because the audiobook has, go and do these exercises. And I'm like, I'm driving, I cannot. So,
it's got both parts. People end up buying both because they're like, okay. And then they listen to the audio. The audio is, it's good. We did a good job.
Okay, good. Very good.
Good. Well, everyone, this has been a great conversation. Leisa, thank you for taking the time out of your day to share. Thank you for writing the book. Thank you for listening to Arianna Huffington. Thank you for not going to that meeting in the World Trade Center so we can meet. Just amazing how intricate and amazing the world is. So thank you. Thank you for what you do. And we can't wait to share this with our audience, and can't wait to get our hands on the book.
Thank you so much for this time. I really, really have enjoyed it.